Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today we have another video for you and another video in our Start Collecting series looking at the brand new boxes that have come out alongside Broken Realms Morathi. And today in particular we're looking at the Idoneth Deepkin box known as the Bloodsurf Hunt. So first of all, let's talk about what exactly is in the Bloodsurf Hunt box. So to start with, we get an Achillean king. This is a Idoneth Deepkin character model, as you might expect. It's a king. He's a combat-orientated buff piece for the army and has some really cool things he can do in unison with other units throughout the army. To start with, he has a cool ability that allows other friendly Achillean units, so that is the more elite Idoneth Deepkin, the ones with eyes, to reroll ones to hit while they hold within 12 inch of him. So this includes the two sharks you see in the box set here. He will also include himself obviously as well. He then has some other cool abilities, especially his command ability, which actually allows you to pick a unit and give it +1 attack to all its profiles. The sharks there actually have 2 combat profiles, so they get an extra 2 attacks every time he uses this. And unlike a lot of other command abilities, you can actually stack this command ability. Though the one thing with this command ability is it can only be used once per game, as it can only be used in your turn 3 when you have High Tide off. Well, not once per game, that would actually be twice per game because there's 2 turns in a battle round where you could use this. But this can really make saving up your command points throughout the game worthwhile, as you spend them all in this one big turn of utter carnage as your army rams through your opponent's defenses just by a weight of, well, decent attacks, because generally the things that he can put this on have pretty good profiles to use. And let's talk about those things he can use this on, and we'll start with obviously the only other unit in the box, and that is the Achillean Alapex, who have in Broken Realms Morathi received a brand new War Scroll. This is a really good, solid upgrade from the old War Scroll and makes these sharks or Alapexes feel much more like they should in game. They've lost one of their 3 attack profiles, but in return, their currently new 2 attack profiles have now gone up in both reliability to get hits and wounds off, and in their damage potential. So the Ferocious Bite has changed from a 1 attack to a 3 attacks attack. Now hits on 3s and 3s, does run 2, but instead of damage 3 from the 1 attack, it's now damage 2. So this actually goes, potential damage of 3, when very likely your actual damage, would be none. When you're 1 attack, it rarely will ever go through. This is much more likely to actually get damage through, and also has a higher maximum cap. The barbed hooks and blades as well are still there. They're 3s and 3s, no rend damage 1. It's some nice additional splash damage, but it's in their abilities as well where I really think that the Alapexes have really gone up in power. They have Bloodthirsty Predators, and this is now the ability to give them +1 attack if they're attacking effectively an enemy unit that's been hurt in some way. Whether it's had models slain that turn or is currently carrying wounds on it. Very, very shark-like, very thematic. The whole stuff we see of like sharks can smell blood in the water. Whether or not that's true, irrelevant. It's a cool theme, and they've really brought it out in this rule, which is awesome. And then this is probably my favorite one. So when they have the net launcher, which I think should be your go-to weapon for shooting, if it's been hit, now note, hit, it doesn't have to have been wounded or damaged. Hit by a Rotarius net launcher, the unit hit by it cannot actually make a pile-in. Now, where this is really good is that you have very small units when you're playing with Idoneth Deepkin, particularly how this box set sort of steering you down a very Achillean heavy route. So you're going to be either playing with Alapexes, Leviathans, or Eels potentially, which means you can pile in your very small frontage unit into the flanks of your enemies, and your opponent can't pile back in. So they're not going to be able to bring their forces to bear on your much smaller units. Meanwhile, you're doing plenty of damage. This can have some really great effects in game and really allow you to play smartly and just really make use of this as well. But let's get looking at where we can expand this army, because while it is a really cool box set and it is at really good value, it does have, you know, 2 different kits in it. There's not much here. So let's look at how we can expand this box set. So let's look at where we can go on from that box set. And to start with, we're going to look at probably the most common unit you might have heard about for Idoneth Deepkin, and that is eels. You might have seen people referring to armies of Idoneth Deepkin as eel spam, and this is just taking these 2 units I'm about to talk about in quite large quantities. Eels are, by I guess popular opinion, one of the best units inside the Idoneth Deepkin battle tome, whichever version you take of them, and let's talk a little bit about them. So both versions of the eels have a decent armor save, have a high amount of wounds, which makes up for their lack of numbers, and they're also on relatively small cavalry bases. They both have a very high movement of 14 and can fly, which makes them able to get to anywhere they need to be with ease. Ishleyan Guard are the first units that we're going to talk about, and it should be noted that both units of eels are also Achelian, which means they are elite units, and the Achelian King's abilities will work on them. So Ishleyan Guard are the unit referred to commonly as defensive eels. They have an unrendable save, and effectively just, their save can never be dropped. They have a 4-up save that will always be a 4-up save, have 4 wounds each. This just makes them really hard to shift, and if you play them well and start turning them on the sides so that the lengthwise of their base is the frontage that the unit gets, you can defend objectives really well with them. Morsar Guard are the other version of eel, and they are commonly referred to as offensive eels. They have a lot of mortal wound potential, and when you combine them with the Achelian Alapex's ability to not allow enemy units to pile in, they can sort of overcome their one weakness, which is that 12 wounds at a 4-up save. While yes, it may sound really great against a lot of units that can disappear really quickly, especially when you start calculating things in like rend. With the Alapex's ability to shoot something and not allow them to pile in, this can really make it easy for your offensive eels to hit the flank of an enemy unit, do maximum damage, and not receive much retaliation in return. It's these sort of combinations that make Idoneth really fun to play. The next unit we're going to look at is a foot character, and probably the only non-mounted unit we're going to look at, really, and that is an Ishran Tidecaster. Now, this is an Idoneth wizard, but that's not the reason we're taking it. She allows you to play Idoneth very differently, and while the lists we're looking at today are Iron Rack, this model can allow you to flip the tides essentially, which means you can have your big Bemo turn of High Tide in turn 2 instead of turn 3. This allows you to play much more offensively and really go for that early game win. Not just that, or try and rack up so many points and kill your opponent that you can either A, have collected enough points so your opponent can't catch you, or B, have your opponent off the table so that you can win late game when there's not much your opponent can do to stop you. She gives you just some alternate ways to play, and is why I suggest her for the most part, in that she can give you different ways to play. The last unit we're going to talk about is another unit that's received an updated War Scroll and has really, I think, come into its own in the new Broken Realms Morathi book, and that is the Achelian Leviathan. First of all, this is just an amazing model. Who doesn't want a giant battle turtle with a big mount on its back with a whole bunch of elves on it fighting in their army? Like, the model itself is amazing. I absolutely love this model. But that's not all. So first of all, he's had a massive change where he no longer provides cover, but actually provides +1 armor save around him, which is really cool. However, this only does work on Idoneth Deepkin units with an wounds characteristic of 8 or less that are wholly within any friendly Leviathans. He does also benefit Namati near him as well. But we're not really using a lot of Namati in the list we've worked out. The Achelian Leviathan has some decent attacks, and it's upped its Crushing Jaws attacks rate, but split the damage down. So it's no longer 1 damage 6 attack, it's actually 2 damage 3 attacks now. It's got some cool abilities like Crushing Charge and Jaws of Death. And then the Mortal Wounds 6 still happens though with its Crushing Jaws from the Jaws of Death ability, so it can still do some decent Mortal Wound, just has a higher chance of actually doing it. It can potentially actually do 12 Mortal Wounds with those jaw attacks. For me though, it's all about the buffing that this thing does, just giving you that extra armor save, remembering that you're also counted as in cover when you're Idoneth Deepkin in turn 1. So you can actually potentially with this model in your army have +2 armor save on all the models around it in your army in turn 1. Really cool. That can make a lot of your units really survivable. All of a sudden, even things like Namati Thralls and Reavers are looking at 3-up, 4-up sort of saves. Really cool. But let's use this information and let's go and build an army list. So here's an army list I've put together, just 1,000 points, looking at how we can sort of start to build an Idoneth Deepkin force, focused around the stuff that we're getting inside the Bloodsurf Hunt box. Of course, we're going to be using the battalion, the Bloodsurf Hunt, that's going to be the focal point of this list. And so we've started with a leader who's going to be an Achillean King. Now, when you use the Bloodsurf Hunt, the character in it becomes a named character, so he can't take anything. Although you'll note I've got a command trait, that's because he gets given this command trait automatically if he's part of the battalion. And Lord of the Sea and Storm is pretty cool. It's +2 bravery. I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but when you've got such low model count units, you really don't want to be rolling battle shock tests and losing one. An extra model every time you lose one can be quite devastating and not something you want to have to do. So, in all honesty, it's a good command trait for the type of list we're running because it just mitigates battle shock almost to non-existence. Now, it's up for debate whether or not named characters can take mount traits on their mounts. I've not chosen to go one here, but it is a currently debated sort of subject. So go look into that at your own will, I would suggest. My personal feeling on it is that named character mounts should not be able to take mount traits. They can't take anything else, or why should they be able to take mount traits? The mount is just as much a character as the person riding it, for me. Battle line, we've chosen to take 3 units of Ishalayan Guard. Now, number one, we've taken them because they're cheaper. They do come in at 30 points cheaper than the Morsark Guard. And also, we're going to use offensively, we've got Alapexes later to do the offensive job for us. So we're looking at 3 units of Ishalayan Guard who can go take objectives and hold them, or potentially be screens in front of our army. Now, what's great about Idoneth Deepkin screens is that your enemy actually has to shoot the closest unit. So you can put this Ishalayan Guard out front, meaning your Achillean Alapexes and the general, the Achillean King, cannot be targeted if the Ishalayan Guard are closer to your enemy. So lastly, we're then going to take 2 Achillean Alapexes and 1 Achillean Alapex. The coolest thing about Achillean Alapexes is they can be taken in units. That unit of 2 should be able to put out quite a decent amount of damage, and that's really where the command points are going to go in turn 3 for our army, is into that 2-man unit of Alapexes, hoping they can do as much damage as possible. It's also worth noting you could potentially also use it in the Ishalayan Guard if your Alapexes get picked off or weakened severely early on, because the Ishalayan Guard do have a decent amount of attack profiles on them, so they actually do get quite a bit of use out of the Achillean King's command ability. Lastly, as mentioned, we're going to take the Bloodsurf Hunt as a battalion, and this is really cool. It allows your Achillean King to palm off wounds essentially to Alapex units near him. So most likely what you would want to be doing is palming off wounds to the singular Alapex, not the unit of 2, because you don't want to weaken them, and using that one Alapex there as just sort of a bodyguard. The other thing we get with this is obviously the command trait, and we also get a command point, so this means you're going to be a +1 attack to start the game with, meaning when at the time, if you've not had to spend any command points, which hopefully, thanks to Lord of the Sea and Storm, you shouldn't have, because you shouldn't be taking Battle Shock all that much. If you're taking Battle Shock, and your units are probably already dead. So potentially by turn 3 you should have 4, so you'd be +4 attacks on all the attack profiles of whichever unit you choose to use the command ability on, which is really cool. But that's it for the list. I just wanted to give a nice little fun sample list looking at expanding the box set into a cool little army. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, down in the description below, you'll find a link to our Discord server. You can come chat with me and all members of our community that's fastly growing, and it's a great little space to chat some hobby. And lastly, a special shout out to all the people who support the channel via Patreon. Shout out to our Sinful Guard Militia members, Christian Weir, Philip Ward, Soren, Kenny Lowe, and our Free Guild Regiment members, James and AJC. Thank you all so much for our support, and if you'd like to support us like these fine people do, then please follow the link in the description to our Patreon and you can sign up there. But that's it from us today, guys and girls, and everyone else. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now. I'll see you again real soon.